declare open this hearing of the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee. I ask that mobile telephones please be turned to silent. I begin by acknowledging the traditional Aboriginal owners of the land on which we are meeting, the lands of the Wurundjeri people. We pay our respects to them, their elders past, present and emerging, as well as elders from other communities who may be here with us today. On behalf of the Parliament, the committee is conducting this inquiry into the 2025-26 budget estimates. The committee's aim is to scrutinise public administration and finance to improve outcomes for the Victorian community.
Can I ask how many civil cases have been filed against Victoria Police in relation to police misconduct in the last 5 years?
That data's not provided to me and I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Previous answer was given for 700 staff currently out on work cover, additional number on notice on extended sick leave. How many of those are experiencing mental health and related issues due to poor workforce culture such as bullying or sexual harassment?
If I could just maybe kick off first, Chief. What's important to notice is on our work cover numbers, the vast majority relate to mental health instances rather than physical injury. That's a large part, I think, too, of the trauma that's associated with police work, and I'm sure the Chief can speak further to that, but I understand that the further point you're going to, but I would say that overwhelmingly those who are interacting with our work cover programs, it's mostly mental health related matters, and that's particularly, I think, a sign of the trauma and the difficult work that first responders do at Victoria Police, where it's a more limited number that relate to physical injury. But I'll ask the Chief if he'd like to add further to my comments.
Thank you, Police Minister. As of the 31st of March 2025, there were 727 employees absent from our workplace on work cover claims. 129 were due to physical injuries, 598 due to mental injuries. The large majority of those mental injuries related to causal factors of a personal nature. The minority was work-related claims.
Over the last decade, funding to Victoria Police has almost doubled. It's now $4.5 billion per year. But in the same decade, looking at the Victoria Police annual report, there's been a sharp decline in public trust in police. 2014, 78% of Victorians reported satisfaction with policing services. 2024, it was 55%. 2014, 89% believed that VicPol acted with integrity, and a decade later, it's 62%. Sounds like a broken system, doesn't it?
There's probably a couple of points I'd make with regard to the statistics you've alluded to there. One of them would be, we know, through the COVID period, and much was asked of Victoria Police in enforcing laws through that period in a very tough time, and we know that that has an effect around public perception. No one really likes the law being enforced on them in what are very trying times for all Victorians. That'd be one element. I think also what I'll point out through the EBA process, they're tough processes, but we secured a strong outcome, an agreed outcome between Victoria Police and the association to see members get a 4.5% pay rise. But I think that the public perception of the argy-bargy, those things can have an effect on perception. And lastly, I would say that Mr Mike Bush, who is coming as the new Chief Commissioner on the 27th of June, has a very demonstrated track record in New Zealand of turning around public perceptions of the police service in New Zealand. He's been certainly a key part of our engagement with him and his appointment. It's some clear KPIs around turning that around, improving that here in Victoria. He's got a track record of delivering that. I'm sure that he will be able to deliver results here and bringing that fresh new mindset where he's delivered that in organisations he's run before, I expect, and we require him to do that here, and he's committed to lead that work. But the Chief might like to add something further.
Conscious of the time, but the approach adopted by that survey has shifted significantly, and every police jurisdiction around Australia has experienced a similar decline. Historically, calls were made via hardline phones to residents in Victoria. There's been a shift now where those phone calls are made to mobile phones, and now social media, online surveys are now the adopted practice, and we've seen in every jurisdiction in Australia a decline in the level of community confidence and trust in policing. Suffice to say, it's pivotal for us to continue to commit it to community engagement and build that trust beyond those numbers.
Can I ask, what metrics are you using to evaluate the rollout of the FAS to ensure it meets the needs of victims and mitigates risk of secondary traumatisation? You mentioned one metric is paying invoices in 30 days. Are there any other specific metrics you can tell us about?
I'll ask my colleagues to go to some of those performance indicators. I think our starting point, of course, is in transitioning from a more adversarial court-based VOCAT system to the FAS, which has always, of course, been a victim-built system, if you like, a victim-centred system, and the fact that we're seeing, well, there's legal representation in terms of processing some of the applications. More and more we're seeing directly victims wanting to have ownership and a voice in proceeding with their applications themselves, and this is the system that reflects their empowerment.
Can you outline what budget lines in your portfolio in this year's budget contribute to the government's early intervention investment framework?
Well, there are a range of different elements that I think go to our youth crime prevention program. We've outlined, I think, some particular initiatives that I went to just before, which is the fourth year of our funding for our $13.64 million youth crime prevention program. There's just 13 programs already operating that are funded until the middle of next year. I outlined just before around new funding for our Mally Together supporting our young people program. Also undergo the EOP program. I touched on several $1 million that we've also provided for that program, which was the $3.8 million to continue Werribee and Dandenong. I also think it's important to note across more broadly, not just my portfolio, community safety, as I said earlier, is a whole of government program, a whole of government initiative, and I would just draw your attention further that not just in the justice portfolio, the $106 million around the youth justice system, because that means those who are in our custody can now, through legislative changes that many of us have been engaged in this room, provide services and support to those who are in the care and custodial settings for young people, and we're under obligation to provide those services, and they're early intervention services that weren't previously available. There's also $28 million to continue initiatives to combat violent extremism under our CVE program. That's very significant and has been outlined in the budget papers for my portfolio. And there's some $19 million to continue employment hubs in our prisons through my colleague Mr Erdogan, and that's also another critical project that goes to early intervention and support programs. And there are some new self-determination grants programs for First Nations people on bail and remand, and there's about $22 million allocated to that program.
Minister, you just listed funding for custodial settings in part of your answer then. In your assessment, is incarceration a prevention strategy?
I think what's important in the work that we're doing around custodial settings is the legislative changes, in particular through the Youth Justice Act last year, that has required and we've funded support programs and services, whether they're clinical supports and other service and education supports for young people in youth justice settings. And I think that means that unfortunately, where incarceration as a last resort has to occur, we have an obligation to make sure that we're providing services and supports to those who are in the state's care, and that's been outlined in the budget.
Can I also ask, if the cause for removal from a trainer is injury, is Greyhound Racing Victoria aware if veterinary care has been provided?
I'm happy to take it on notice and check with GRV.
Breeding caps have been pretty widely recommended in greyhound racing. Can I ask why we haven't introduced one?
Well, we take our advice from the code, from Greyhound Racing Victoria around those matters, and I'm confident that the work that Greyhound Racing Victoria are doing and the work they do with our participants closely monitors those matters, and they do make significant contributions through their annual report. But if there's something further that I can provide, I'll be happy to do that.
Can I ask why there's reportedly a 2-year waiting list for GAP and where greyhounds are kept during that time?
Oh, well, the GAP facility in Seymour has been operates effectively. There are some waiting times, and but I think what's important here is we're able to.
Apologies, Minister. I declare this hearing adjourned.